Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dell. Today I'm going to give an extensive esoteric breakdown on this insidious metaphysical piece of literature called the Codex Gigas, which is also known as the Devil's Bible, that's concealed by the dark priesthood of the Vatican Church, which coincides to the occultic blueprint of the draconian reptilian agenda called the CodexLeicester. And guess who owns it, ladies and gentlemen? Bill Gates. Now, in 1994, Bill Gates purchased this 72-page manuscript for $30 million that was created by Leonardo da Vinci in 1510. Now, with supreme discernment, what you got to ask yourself is, why would somebody assimilate this amount of money to purchase this piece of literature? That's because it's talking about the luminosity of the moon and the terraforming of planet Earth by going from a three-dimensional state to a fifth-dimensional state due to extraction, right? Now, let me get my screen share going here. Right? So now when you're talking about extraction, you are talking about the planet going from a three-dimensional state into a fourth and fifth-dimensional state. So with that being said, you're basically talking about the photon hydrogen atom creates electromagnetic energy, which also creates helium, and that helium creates electrons and carbon that's usurped through a black hole, which is the fourth and fifth dimensional shift, and gives power to everything that's natural on the planet. So when you're talking about everything in nature being, natural, that means that carbon is the building block of all civilization, and everything that's unnatural to the planet is going to be left behind. Everything that's natural to the planet is going to ascend. So when you're talking about the reptilian cannot take up on the anatomy of a carbonated neuromelanetic being, because our anatomy is acclimated to nature. So that means a reptilian cannot ascend with the planet. It can only take up on the anatomy of a person who has the six ether genetical properties, right? So now when you're talking about the Codex Gigas, or the CodexLeicester, it's talking about the future of the tectonic plates. So that's how you know when the pole shift starts to take place, this is where all the calamities and everything that's going to happen. So this, the CodexLeicester is basically a blueprint for the draconian reptilians to basically give power to the three-dimensional world, meaning that they want to save this planet so they can have keep their power, right? So this is basically an emulation of everything that's taking place when you're talking about the CodexLeicester. This is part of the 72-page manuscript, and it's basically showing you the attributes of the moon stealing energy from the sun. So that tells you right there that the moon is basically a megastructure. It's not real. So now we're going to be talking about the Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas, this is the Devil's Bible. So if you look closely, you can see that there's a being on this page, which is a reptilian, because a reptilian has 4 fingers. Now with discernment, what you got to ask yourself is, why would somebody concoct this, this piece of literature? Look how big it is. You see what I'm saying? And I'm gonna give you a closer look of what you're looking at on that book. This is a reptilian. It has 4 fingers. So if you read any of Dr. York's, some of his literature, he gives you, the delineation between a reptilian or a Chitauri and things of that nature. These are beings that came from the draconian star constellation and came down to the three-dimensional world to enforce draconian laws upon the original people, right? So now when you're talking about the literature and the context, that's inside the book, this is some of the artwork that's inside the Codex Gigas, and this is called the draconic language, right? So now when you're talking about the draconic language, where is it at? Let me get it going. Now you're talking about the draconic language, and it says that the language is primarily used for lizard folk and troglodytes. What is a troglodyte? A troglodyte is a person who's connected to the Edomites, who's connected to the Esau bloodline when you're talking about the Bible, and it's also connected to the Canaanites, who are part of the Fluga lords, the people who, that was created in 4086 BC on the island of Patmos, or the island of Peline, when you're talking about the creation of mankind, basically. So the draconic language, when you look at the the energy drink of the symbolism that's on the energy drink called the monster, right? That is draconic language, which is also the symbol of the beast called 666, right? So now what we're going to be talking about is there's a lady by the name of Alexander Wilder, and she talks about, you know, her experience with the Draconian reptilians and how she was, you know, she was exposed to these beings during this place of time because she used to live in Buckingham Palace. So she understands the reality of everything that's taking place on the planet. And she was also killed for putting out these interviews. So I'm gonna show you you know, it's about 10 minutes long. So I'm gonna show you this video of it.
The Illuminati, as the popular term for them today, is a group which has been around for thousands of years on this planet. They came from off of this planet and interbred with humans. They are reptilian. They have their chosen bloodlines, and they continue to try and keep their genetics pure and interbreed with these chosen bloodlines. These beings are part human and they are part reptilian. And they continue to run the planet. They are our world leaders, and nobody at this current time who is a government leader.
Mind you, like I said, she was killed for putting out these types of interviews. You know what I'm saying? And she was doing this shit in the 1980s and the 1970s. So you cannot give an excuse, you know what I'm saying, about, you know, you cannot create a rebuttal talking about she's clout chasing. Well, nobody chasing no clout. You know what I'm saying? Like, this shit wasn't even heard of during the 1970s. And she was coming out with this type of information. And she was killed for it.
Is there running the countries unless they were put there by them or they are one of them. Bloodline, in my particular case, I was a slave. And to them, most of humanity, or all of humanity, they consider inferior. They consider humanity a resource to be used for their purpose.
So when you're talking about a resource, what type of resource? You're talking about the extraction of energy. They use our energy. They harvest our sexual energy, our spiritual energy, and our physical energy just to give power to the three-dimensional world, which creates a capitalistic system under a draconian law. So now you see why they want us to work so much. Now you see why 800,000 kids come up missing on the planet, because those kids are used for the extraction of adrenochrome. Adrenochrome is how they hold their form, right? So now you can see, like I said, all the kidnappings and the Pizzagate and things of that nature. Now you see why all these kids and these people come up missing on the planet. That's because we are used as a food source and an energy source to give power to their anatomy.
They are at a time, a very important time right now, when they are working with some new energies on this planet that they don't work well with. So a lot is coming out into the open, and that is higher law, that it must come out into the open. And they are under higher law also.
So when you're talking about under higher law, who are they talking about? They are under higher law of the Anunnaki. So when you're talking about angels and demons, you are actually talking about the Anunnaki versus the Draconian reptilians. Now, you know what I'm saying, it's basically been condensed down to a three-dimensional physical state and watered down. And so now you're talking about angels and demons, when really you're talking about the Anunnaki versus the Draconian reptilians, and they under a higher law, who are the Anunnaki, who is supreme being of Anu, who is Elion, Elion El, the Most High. So that's the person she's talking about. So, and the Draconian reptilians are under that law.
I was chosen for what I did and for my involvement because my family was bloodline. My mother's family, all I knew growing up was that they were Irish for generations, not even any brown-eyed people among them. My mother, her sister, went back to Ireland and researched through bloodline, the family genetics, in the early 70s. And I was told that the original family on the father's side actually came from the south of France. Now, anyone that has done any reading from some well-known authors at this point know that southern France plays a major role in this. That is the source of the Merovingian bloodline. On the other side, in her family, it has been told to me that her mother's father was a ritual statistician with the Quaker Coronati Lodge, and he was one of the founding members. That lodge is very involved at a very high level. On my father's side, I have been told that his father, and I have seen the papers, that he's illegitimate. I have also been told by a number of persons approaching me that he is an illegitimate Rothschild. Now, I was always told that that bloodline was impure. The Rothschilds are...
They have an impure bloodline because they are part of the Canaanite bloodline. A Canaanite is a person who's been stripped of their neuromelanin, meaning that they have a calcified pineal gland, so they cannot connect to the source, which is the sun, and ascend into the fourth dimensional states. So that's, like I said, this is how they get power to the three-dimensional world, through capitalism, through material, right? So that's why so everything they do is basically conducive to holding back the fourth and fifth dimensional state, right? That's because, you know, the lunar energy on the planet is what keeps the planet cold. So when you're talking about the beast in the Bible, the beast, when you're talking about Leviticus chapter 13 to 14 in the Bible, it talks about how the beast was cursed with leprosy. When you curse with leprosy, cold weather is conducive to leprosy. That's why they want to keep it so cold on the planet. You know what I'm saying? Because planet Earth, the original form of it is it's nothing but sustainable, you know, solar energy. This is a hot planet. So how, you know, what you got to understand is how you think dinosaurs were able to exist during the Cretaceous period. You know what I'm saying? That's because planet Earth is a tropical planet. It's not meant to be cold here. Cold weather is under the servitude of Leviathan. It's a spell. It's a spell casting to keep you in a physical state by putting the body in retrograde, to keep you bound to the planet under their draconian laws.
Are not looked upon within the Illuminati as a pure high bloodline. They have a lot of arguments among themselves as to the purity of their bloodlines. And there is a group within, or there are more than one group within the Illuminati that consider themselves the purest of bloodlines, and that they rule by right. They feel that they rule by right and not...
When you're talking about right, you're talking about Scottish right, you're talking about York right. So those are basically the delineation between the two. You got some that come from the Knights Templar, and you got some that come from the category of the Knights of Malta, which is the highest, you know, supreme. I wouldn't even call it supreme because these people are devils. When you're talking about the highest level of the Freemasonic order that controls the planet.
To be elected by the Pope or okayed by any type of Christianity to rule. So they have many disagreements, discords, and arguments among themselves. And that is a weak point with them, that they cannot agree, and they have big egos. And that is where they will eventually catch themselves up with their ego. I was chosen because of the bloodline, and I was chosen because I have psychic ability. This was tested out and shown when I was a very young child, about age 3. When I was 3 years old, I was causing objects to move without touching them. This is an ability that they look for. It's not important that you can move objects. That's not the important part. That shows that you have a psychic ability, which is what they look for. Because reptilian bloodlines, in a way, they are very psychic. They can read any of you and know what you're going to do before you do it. And they're not to be underestimated that way. But they cannot enter into any dimension higher than a 4th dimension. They do not have the genetics to do it.
You heard what she said. So like I said, they cannot take up on the anatomy of anybody that's natural to the planet. They cannot take up on the anatomy of a so-called Black person because we have too much carbon and we have too much neuromelanin. So we can only ascend because we are acclimated to nature. Everything that's unnatural to nature is going to be left behind in the 3rd dimension because the reptilians, they take up on the form of people who were created in the 3rd dimension through genetic splicing. So that's why they're able to take up on the anatomy of an Asian, Caucasian, and the East Indian. Not saying that everybody that's comprised of those races are reptilian, but only a certain amount of people, because you got some so-called whites, some of them are Pleiadians, you know what I'm saying? Then you got some, you know, that belong to another bloodline and things of that nature. So like I said, you, in order to ascend into the 4th and 5th dimension, you have to have carbon and neuromelanin. So this is why a lot of times they want to enforce interracial dating through the television networking system, right? Because they know that if they amalgamate and procreate with a Black person, they can reincarnate back to the bloodline. So if you reincarnate back to the bloodline, this is how you connect, you know, your bloodline to the 4th and 5th dimensional state, and then cause devilishment once you reach the 19th galaxy, right? So I was wanting to show you that part, you know, of her little breakdown. So I think I got some pictures. No, that's all for that. So we're also I'm gonna give you a breakdown of what is a draconian law. So this is how you know that Earth is basically a prison planet, because it's under, you know, under the servitude and governed by the draconian reptilians. So when you talk about draconian laws, this is basically saying that it limits your freedom and restricts you in your ability to speak against the government, which is what we got going on right now. They can lead the government, overreach, and restrict our right to privacy. So now you're talking about the Patriot Act that was signed by George Bush, and it was extended by Obama. And I think he signed that in 2000. He extended it his first term. And then they also can use unfairly target against certain groups, such as minorities and political dissidents. So anybody that's speaking against the government, you will target. Anybody who wants to deviate from the status of being a United States citizen, they'll call you an identity extremist. You see what I'm saying? So everything that, you know, that coincides to their draconian reptilian agenda coincides to their laws, right? So anybody that's speaking truth online, you are an adversary and an op to the draconians, because that means that you are basically a glitch in a matrix system, right? So with all that being said, man, this is how you understand, like, to understand the reality of what a reptilian is and if they're real or not, you have to go all the way back to history. Because, you know what I'm saying, when you look at the Sumerian hieroglyphics, when you look at the Phoenician hieroglyphics, when you look at the Egyptian hieroglyphics, when you read the Emerald tablets, when you read the Holy tablets, you know what I'm saying, when you come across people like Credo Matua, who was a Zulu nation master. He's a master teacher. He talks about the reptilians. So, you know, none of this stuff is, you know, basically conspiracy. So when you're talking about angels and demons and devils and stuff like that, you're actually talking about the angels, who are the Anunnaki, and you're talking about demons and devils, who are actually draconian reptilians. But it's just been watered down and spiritualized into a three-dimensional physical state, to where now you reading the Bible and you're talking about some motherfucking angels and some motherfucking demons and some devils. They got you thinking that a devil is a person with red skin underneath the ground. A devil is basically a person who doesn't have the anatomy to withstand the fourth and fifth dimensional state, which is the heavens, new heaven and new earth. I'm talking about extraction. So with all that being said, man, get this video out there. I just wanted to, you know, to shine light on this topic, because you have to understand, why do these people do what they do? Why would Bill Gates purchase this, you know, this literature for $30 million? You see what I'm saying? Why would he want to use geoengineering to block the sun? Because it coincides to the blueprint of the CodexLeicester that is propagated by the Codex Gigas. So with that being said, get this video out there, subscribe, hit the like button. Follow me on Instagram at BDell1014, BDELL1014. Thanks for watching. Share this video. I'll be back in a couple days with another video. We're going to be talking about these new gun laws that's going to be taking place, and how it's basically an emulation of the purge. And thanks for watching.